Oh, good. Hi, Tom. He's there.
Oh, Kurt.
All right, we'll get started here. I'd I'd like to call to order the California High-Speed Rail Authority Board meeting. And at this time, I'd like everyone to stand and ask Ms. Flores to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And at this time, I'd like to ask our Executive Director to provide a roll call of members.
Chairman Pringle.
Present.
Ms. Shank.
Here.
Judge Cobb. Here. Mr. Dillon.
Here.
Ms. Flores.
Here.
Mr. Cash.
Here.
Quorum is present. Oh, sorry, Mr. Umber.
Ms. Edwards and Mr. Umberg. Yes, exactly. We're going to put a picture up here so that people see what he looks like from this remote location. Is Mr. Burns going to be here? Not a live feed or anything, but just a static photo. We don't want any current photos, Mr. Umberg. I know Mr. Burns and Mr. Crane are endeavoring to be at the meeting today as well. So the first item on our agenda is that of public comment and the cards that have been submitted. I would first like to ask those who wish to be heard under the public comment portion of the meeting, Supervisor Perea from Fresno.
Thank you, Chairman Pringle, members of the Commission. Just wanted to give you a quick update to Fresno Works and our project in Fresno. Our committees are working very, very diligently on the work and getting together our application and preparation work for the high-speed maintenance facility, as well as we have teams now also working on the station and the alignments. Our partners in the city of Fresno, Kelly Riddle and Ed Gravelin, are in the audience with us today, too. And just want to tell you that we've met with URS. I think we're doing a lot of legwork with them, and we offer to you, as we have to them, that whatever it is that we can do to make our sites prepared and ready to go for you all to make a decision in the very near future, we're ready to do that. And the last thing I'd like to say is I invite you, Chair Pringle, and Ms. Flores as our Valley Rep to come to Fresno. I know you're busy, but I would like to give you a tour of our site and answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I will give you a call. I want to come in April. I'd like to ask then the other public speakers, Bobby Kahn, and following that presentation by Kathy Hamilton. Yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is Bobby Kahn. I'm the Executive Director of the Madera County Economic Development Commission, but I'm here, I was asked to read this letter into record on behalf of the City of Madera today following their council meeting last night. I'm going to apologize ahead of time. I might, at your direction, summarize this a little bit because the mayor wrote this letter, and you know how elected officials can be. They can sometimes be a little long-winded. I don't think I'm going to be able to get all this in 3 minutes, so I'm going to do my best.
Well, how about doing this one better? You provide us a copy of the letter, every board member will get it, and you can summarize, and I will tell the mayor that you did a very good job summarizing.
I'd appreciate that since we receive a fair amount of funding from them. But I'll read the front page and I'll summarize the other 3 pages. But it says, Dear Chairman Pringle, over the past several months, the City of Madera has had the opportunity to participate in route evaluation process for the Merced to Fresno section of the California High-Speed Rail Project. The City appreciates the willingness of the High-Speed Rail Authority's project team to meet with the City, with the representatives, and to answer questions to the extent the information has been available. We recognize the section of the high-speed rail corridor passing through Madera, including in and around the City of Madera, is a critical component to the system, not only for the San Joaquin Valley, but the statewide as a whole. The City continues to support the development of the statewide system. I'm going to just summarize here about they've found it in the early process of identifying potential alignments. The City of Madera found it difficult to believe that constructing an elevated corridor through the middle of an established city and its historic downtown without the ability to have a station would ever be considered as a preferred alignment. At this point, it is very clear that the alternative alignment running through the heart of Madera, A2, is being advanced as a viable alternative by the high-speed rail project team and has every chance of being selected by your board. From there, I'm just going to summarize what they point out several different areas, and I will not read through all of these because I know I will take up too much of your time. But it talks about property investment, how the A2 line, whether or not the funding is adequate to build the line or not, but if the environmental impact report goes through, that it would put a cloud on all the titles of the properties. Industrial jobs, we have several industrial projects both on the north and south ends of the city that could have an effect, and although relocation has been offered, that industrial locations are not that easy to relocate and could easily leave the community with an estimated job loss of over 500. Affordable commercial projects would displace a large number of commercial projects in the downtown area, which is an affordable area. These businesses would not have the means to locate. Visual character talks about there's no buildings in the city of Madera that are higher than 3 stories. The height of this project would be a visual would be the visual focal point of the city and not one that would be desirable. The community division, we already have a problem in the city of Madera with the railroad tracks going through, and this would just exacerbate that problem. Existing neighborhoods, you'd have housing that is in the shadows of this structure. Site development, local circulation, they talk about the problems that they already have dealing with the rail alignment in their city. New public improvements, the difficulties of that. Talks about highway properties and public safety issues, and I see my time is up, so I will submit this to you.
Thank you very much.
For you each to review.
Thank you very much. Ms. Hamilton, then we'll hear from Mr. William Newsom. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. This is a serious subject. It's called a plea for civility. At least 8 people in the peninsula and surrounding cities have received either bodily harm threats or death threats. I received a threat myself last night. I do not think that the High-Speed Rail Authority is behind this, but I do think that anything that the public relations branch of high-speed rail could do to encourage their blogging groups that are, pro-project as is, to encourage that the messages that are posted are not inflammatory and negative. There's been a lot of really bad messages. And I know there's only one that allows for anonymous posting, but I just want to say that just because we don't agree on every aspect of the high-speed rail and how it's implemented, doesn't mean we can't do it with grace and civility, and just wanted to let you know about that. And we will be filing reports with the police.
Thank you. Mr. Newsom, following by Elizabeth Alexis.
Good morning. William Newsom from San Francisco.
Uh-huh.
I'll be very brief. First, I wanted to thank the board on its wonderful work so far. And second, in your search for an executive director, I'd like to remind you, amongst all the qualifications, to remember to look for someone who's passionate and enthusiastic. I'd rather have someone slightly underqualified but very passionate rather than someone who's excellently qualified but disinterested. And finally, I promised a friend I would remind you or ask you to please build underground in Burlingame and don't forget the small communities. Thank you.
Well, thank you and your friend. Ms. Alexis, following her, Mr. Jim Bigelow.
Hi, Elizabeth Alexis from CARD, Californians Advocating Responsible Rail Design. And I want to speak briefly about the ridership memo that was circulated outside, but I don't believe is part of the formal agenda today. I'm actually the individual that was referenced several times as the person who got a hold of the, who's given the new sort of model coefficients, and I'm concerned about the memo in 2 ways. First, the memo states repeatedly the importance of this ridership analysis to many other studies that are done throughout the state, and to many aspects of the system itself, including decisions that more capacity was needed between Anaheim and Los Angeles. And it's for that reason that the absolutely making sure that these numbers are valid is just of utmost importance. And the reason we requested these numbers were, one, is that after sort of repeatedly going through the documentation, which was actually very difficult to read through, we came to the realization that the surveys that had been done for a while, they sort of looked good on the outside. When you actually took a careful look, had some serious flaws in them. 96% of the commuters surveyed were current train riders, for instance. For the long distance commuters, the people who are driving long distances to get to work, there were literally only 27 people surveyed. I'm going to stop with the econometric detail now, but there are some serious issues, and the board should be aware that it's really their responsibility to be digging into this and not just take the word that this is all fine and dandy. The peer review itself had issues. I've spoken to a number of the members of the peer review committee, and I think knowing what they know now, they would have some very different things to say. The second thing is on a process issue. I mean, I'd like the board to be finding out why this information was not made public. It really, if it was public, I'm trying to find where it was, because Cambridge Systematics, I just stopped publication of a journal article they were publishing in 2010 that had the old, outdated models in it. There is a serious question about why the new and real models that were finalized in February 2007 are not what's being shown as the public face of this until today. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Bigelow and then Mr. Henning.
Jim Bigelow with the Redwood City San Mateo County Chamber. Good morning. And what I'd like to do, I gave you each one of these brochures on the Peninsula Rail Program, and I want to say a few words about it. This program is a partnership between Caltrain and the high-speed rail. And some of the community outreach meetings that are being held in the area of interest with a lot of comments, typically we just see the high-speed rail side of the issue. For people who live on the San Francisco Peninsula, becoming more informed and aware of the electric motorized units and what's in it for us locally to take our Caltrain and put it to a rapid transit system and share the financial resources to make this happen, I think would make the meetings a lot more pleasant than a number of them have been to date. So I would give that to you as a strong suggestion. Having attended many of these meetings, I can see where it would have been nice to have a little softer approach with the partnership. People have to understand that there is a partnership agreement between San Jose and San Francisco. It involves 3 counties, high-speed rail, and there's potentially some ARRA money that might come our way if we get everything together. On agenda item 10, we are looking forward to the detailed report, which hopefully will bring current the issues with the legal matter so that perhaps that can become a point of history. So keep up your work, and we do support the San Francisco to Anaheim, Los Angeles component. And as I get done, I haven't been here too much. I've undergone a aortic heart valve replacement surgery with the pig valve. The pig and I are doing just fine, thank you. And I'm pretty well back together on a normal schedule, so you'll see me more and more. And I haven't gone away. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, may I comment? It's nice to have Jim back. He's one of the grand old warriors. I wouldn't say old. Our hair looks remarkably alike. But he's one of the grand warriors in this process and went through a hard time, and he's back. And nice to have him back.
Great. Thank you. I also should say I had a lovely time in San Mateo County this past month and met with probably 25 elected officials in the county from the majority of cities, as well as a couple members of the board of supervisors, in discussion of high-speed rail and the cooperative work with Caltrain, and I was very impressed by that. and see how that could be a value to us in other parts of the state. Yes, and Mr. Henning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Patrick Henning on behalf of the California State Council of Laborers. We represent about 80,000 workers up and down this state of ours, largely construction workers. We are in unprecedented times. In my union, we're looking at somewhere upwards of over 30% unemployment. We have a lot of skilled, trained workers that are ready to work now. And unfortunately, there are just not enough projects out there. The high-speed rail represents, and I know I don't need to tell a lot of you this, particularly you, Mr. Burns, that we need to get these folks back to work. They're, again, well-skilled, well-trained folks, and the high-speed rail represents a large portion of good work, and not just work for our folks, but also the green jobs that our folks back in D.C. as well as our legislature continues to talk about as the types of jobs that will propel us into the future. If we can do anything to speed the process along, we can do anything to support. We've been supportive of the high-speed rail since its very inception and all throughout the budget processes, as well as the bond process, and continuing to support you guys in your work here. I also want to take this opportunity to thank Mady Morshed, who's always been there with an open ear to provide us with the details we need to be able to be good advocates to our workers, and also want to thank the committee as a whole. Thank you all.
Very good. Those are all the cards for public comment that asked to speak on general issues. I do have a number of others that have indicated interest in speaking on specific issues, and I'll call them at that time. Therefore, if there's no other general public comment to be made, we'll move to item number 2. I would like to continue that item of approval of minutes as we are endeavoring to strain our staff to the utmost to get all of that, the minutes available and before the board, and today we do not have those minutes available. Item number 3 is information from the Executive Director Search Committee. Mr. Deardon and I serve on this committee, of which we've met a number of times. I would like at this time to ask Mr. Stuart Sato from CPS and Ms. who is also with Ms. Stephanie Pinson, who have been providing support for the Executive Director search. For general public purposes, I'd like Mr. Sato to provide a briefing as to what has occurred, and later in the meeting we will move to closed session for a discussion of candidates, which will be done in closed session. So, Mr. Sato, if you could provide a general public overview of what the search has entailed at this time.
Keep our comments very brief. Thank you, Chairman Pringle. This is Stephanie Pinson with Gilbert Tweed. We've been working collaboratively in the search process together. We had a directive a little over a month ago to conduct this search for a new executive director, chief executive officer. Advertisements were placed in the appropriate transportation websites. More importantly, we collaborated with Gilbert Tweed and Stephanie to do the direct outreach to source candidates. Emails were sent out to transportation leaders nationwide. But again, more importantly, Stephanie, because she's well networked in the transportation industry, directly sourced candidates to garner interest and referrals to top candidates. Thus, we've had 45 applicants to date. Again, as you mentioned, Chairman Pringle, in collaboration with the Executive Search Committee, we've been able to discuss the candidate pool and come up with a list of recommended candidates for your consideration as a full board in closed session later today.
Very good. Any questions of the board of these folks? And we will you'll have plenty of opportunity to have a full discussion on some of the search candidate results later in closed session. So thank you both.
We will look forward to it. Thank you.
I just want to state publicly that we are very benefited by Stuart and CPS stepping forward and jumping right in on this, and equally benefited by the subcontracting arrangement that he established with Gilbert Tweed and Ms. Pinson. I believe when we asked for this to be done and a report to be provided to us at this March 4th meeting, some questioned if that was possible. And I will tell you, and I know Mr. Deardon concurs, that both of you worked so very hard for us to really beat the bushes, not across the country, but around the world, to bring forward candidates that we can consider. So thank you very much for your hard work.
Thank you.
There's no other discussion to come before us on item number 3. We'll move to report on the Executive Administrative Committee. Yesterday, we held this committee with full membership participating, Mr. Kopp and Ms. Flores and myself. We had a complete legislative update on all the bills currently pending, and there was a motion by the committee to take formal action on a number of the bills that are presented in your packet. Therefore, I will share that motion with you and see if that is a motion of the full board. The motion was approved unanimously to oppose AB 2121 of Ms. Harkey, and to change our recommendation from oppose to monitor of Ms. Ducheney's SB 409, to take a formal monitor position on SB 964 and SB 965, and to oppose AB 2356 Carter. So Mr. Kopp will make that motion. Ms. Flores seconds. Any discussion on those items? Yes, Ms. Shank.
Question on
yes, ma'am.
1375.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, presently it's a monitor position on that bill, and in working with the author, it was recommended we maintain that position.
Well, it's so similar to what we opposed in Senator Ducheney's bill that I'm wondering why we have monitor rather than oppose.
Because, in fact, I believe we are working with both of those authors, and we are changing the position of, as part of the motion on Ms. Ducheney's bill to also monitor.
But when it was, before she changed the bill, before Senator Ducheney changed the bill, it was talking about creating this Department of High-Speed Trains within the BT&H agency. And we had quite a good discussion about that and the reasons why we opposed that at this time.
I actually, pardon me, Ms. Shank, but the previous version before Ms. Ducheney replaced all the language this year was to create a Department of Railroads, and it was to combine all railroad functions of Caltrans and high-speed rail into one department. The distinction that...
No, I understand the distinction, but this high-speed rails was subsumed into the Department of Railroads. It was a part of it. So in substance, it was the same thing. Anyway, I just want to make sure that whoever is representing us with the legislators, that they understand at least this member's opposition to creating that kind of a department at this time in our history.
Very good. And all I was suggesting is Ms. Galgiani's bill specifically takes high-speed rail, creates a department, but just for high-speed rail, as opposed to Ms. Ducheney's proposal, which was take all rail functions and put them into one department. That was
but high-speed rail was part of Senator Ducheney's bill. I mean, she very specifically wanted high-speed rail in her Department of Railroads. So I understand that. The issue is, instead of splitting hairs about it, is that, in my view, this is not the right time to create any department that takes high-speed rail and puts it into the BT&H agency, whether it's under a Department of Railroads or under a Department of High-Speed Rail.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you for your opinion on that. I was just answering your question what the difference was between the two bills. One was all-inclusive, one was just focused on high-speed.
I know you want the last word on this. I understand that, Mr. Chairman. The point was that high-speed rail was going to be taken and put into the BT&H agency, whether it was under a Department of Railroads or a Department of High-Speed Rail.
So you may think it's I'm batting it back and forth. I just want to understand what you're saying. So I wanted to make sure you understood where I saw a distinction between the two bills. I believe what I'm hearing you say is you do not want to move high-speed rail into BT&H under any circumstances.
At this time, correct.
So that is good to know. But I was just sharing with you, and if it's important to the rest of the membership here or not, that there is a distinction in what they originally proposed. So that is why we opposed one and monitored the other, which was your original question. But now I think we know where you stand clearly on modifying the structure under BTNH of the High-Speed Rail Authority at this time.
Could I interrupt this cycle? Sorry to impose, but I think the message is that no change right now. We're in the midst of developing a contract, and neither bill would be helpful right now when we're trying to develop contracts with organizations across the world that need to have stability.
Right. And I do think that is an important point of discussion. It was also asked at the committee, though, that there are things we need statutorily in modifying our act and otherwise to move forward. Therefore, we should explore what those statutory changes are. So we've supported bills in the past. Therefore, we should see what are the things that are important to us to move forward. And the committee asked the executive director and our legislative affairs director to craft some of those ideas and bring them back to the executive committee, whereby we can then have that discussion here at the board. Because I don't know if we've had that. So what we look like is we are opposing a lot of things, but I think we need to make sure we're very clear as to what we would want. And I know one of the challenging things is to change the structure in any way in the midst of all that's happening. And I think that is the concern that Ms. Schenck certainly is representing, and you are. So I see that, but I also think we need to make sure we positively respond to legislators as to what direction we think is best for the future of the authority. Mr. Crane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I have a different subject to raise. I understand that Senator Steinberg has introduced a bill that could handicap the authority's ability to engage in vendor financing or other private financing. And I don't think I see it on this list. So I just want to make sure that we are evaluating that. Maybe it doesn't apply to the authority, but I just want staff to make sure that doesn't happen.
So Mr. Crane, that bill was not presented to us in the legislative review, so we'll ask our staff to look into that and bring that back at our next meeting. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Cobb.
Well,
Excuse me, I think Mr. Morshed does, in fact, know a bit about that bill.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Crane did ask that we look into it, and I did ask council to review that particular bill. And the answer we received was that Mr. Steinberg's bill applies to the regulations adopted by the California Transportation Commission relative to the P3 type contracts that the Caltrans and others are going to be doing. And their comment was that in no way does that relate to anything that the authority is doing.
Then just make sure that in no way it relates to anything that the authority is doing.
That's what council
monitor that. Make sure the language is absolutely precise.
Yes.
They have that in the bill.
Very good. So with that, Mr. Morshed, would you ensure that that bill is before the executive committee at the next meeting so that we can then review it and ensure that it does exactly that? Mr. Kopp.
Well, Mr. Chairman and members, you correctly reflect the fact that at least with Ms. Galgiani's bill, we need specific information, and that will be supplied by Mr. Schneid and others on the staff at our next committee meeting. And secondly, the reason for my motion with respect to SB 409 is because of its almost, to me, complete alteration. So that it's a subversion in large part of the Assembly bill by Ms. Galgiani. And by a parity of reasoning, a monitoring position seemed most appropriate rather to maintain an opposed position to provisions which no longer exist.
Very good. We have a motion and a second before us. Yes, Mr. Katz.
Just one thing I wanted to add to the discussion, I think we need to also ask our staff to take a broader look at, going back to both Mr. Crane's point and Ms. Shank's point, not that the legislature ever had, not that there ever are unintended consequences from legislative action, but this is a perfect example where there could be. So I think finance bills, a variety of things, as were pointed out, which may not be designed, thought about the Rail Commission or have anything to do with this, could spill over things that deal with CEQA. So I think we need to monitor all that legislation. Be happy to work with your committee on doing that, obviously. And I think the idea of being able to put something positive on the table at the same time, I agree sort of with the idea of holding back opposition to other legislation, particularly things that are in the first house, so we can also put our positive program together and provide lawmakers with a positive alternative is a smart way to go about doing it.
Very good. I want to make sure there's a pink sheet here which does include a report on AB 2356, and that was not in our packet but provided at the committee and here. And that is a bill that would prohibit any development within 2.5 miles of the Colonel Allensworth State Historic Park in Tulare. So when you talk about unintended consequences, some have direct consequences as well.
Right. That was not unintended.
Yeah, so that,
and I understand why.
But I wanted to bring that to your attention, that was not in the packet, but that was
And that's in my motion.
right, and that is a part of Mr. Kopp's motion. If there's no other discussion on the motion, all those, we need a roll call vote. May I ask you, Mr. Morshed, to do that?
Yes. Ms. Shank?
Aye.
Mr. Burns?
Aye.
Mr. Crane?
Aye.
Mr. Kopp?
Aye.
Mr. Umberg? That was an aye.
Yes.
Mr. Pringle?
Aye.
Mr. Dearden?
Aye.
Ms. Flores?
Aye.
Mr. Katz?
Also, at our executive committee meeting, we had a presentation by Mr. Barker on a business plan addendum, and I asked Mr. Barker to provide a brief report today so you know what he'll be working on, and he was directed to work on as a part of that addendum to our 2009 business plan. Mr. Barker?
Yeah, thank you. As you have in your packet there, a quick briefing. In the 3 months or so since we submitted the revised business plan to the legislature on December 14th, a number of questions have arisen about the business plan. Additionally, a number of events have taken place with our project that have changed it pretty dramatically. We also have a couple of outstanding questions from a number of senators in the legislature, things they'd like to be fleshed out a little more detail on some questions. So for that purpose, what I propose to do is to provide an addendum to the business plan, answer some of those questions, respond directly to a number of criticisms by the Legislative Analyst's Office, and produce that and bring that to you next month at the April board meeting, which will be prior to budget discussions in the legislative subcommittees regarding our budget. So the item was to seek the committee's approval for doing so and input. So that's
Very good. Any questions of Mr. Barker? He outlined in your packet the specific areas he will be addressing in that update. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Barker. Look forward to that review next month. That concludes a report from the Executive Administrative Committee. Now I'd like to move to item 5, Operations Committee report. Mr. Katz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, good meeting yesterday. Focused on two things. First part on the communications, I think we've made significant progress since our last meeting through the work of Mehdi and Carrie and Jeff, as well as Christy and the whole Ogilvy team. They're in the process of doing an audit of what's going on in all the areas with all of their individual communications, centralizing that and making sure that our messages are consistent throughout the state. They find a lot of work that needs to be done, and they're in the process of doing that. At some point, they will also look at how our people are deployed. Do we have the right number of people in the right area, or do we overload it in some areas and need additional people in other areas? And at some point in evening that out, I'm sure some people will move, some people may not stay with the program, but that's the adjustment that will come at the end of the whole audit and assessment they're doing right now. But, as we know, there's been issues having to do with the amount of outreach or when it's occurred or how it's occurred, which comes from a combination of things. One, an agency that a lot of people didn't know existed for years while the agency was going out with a project a lot of people didn't take seriously for years while serious work was being done by the whole engineering and outreach team. So you have sort of the awakening of the public after the bonds passed, combined with where we are today, combined with some good stuff and some missteps that were done that put us in the position of sort of fixing the past and moving ahead for the future at the same time, which is difficult. But as we've all discussed, we want to take a little more time and spend more effort reaching out today than have to spend the time getting sued later, or at least put ourselves in a stronger position when we get sued. Because at the end of the day, some people will not be happy with the decisions we make, but I think everybody on this board feels very strongly and has communicated this to our staff and our consultants very strongly that the one thing that we want to have, one of the things we want to have accomplished by the end of this process is that from a public perception standpoint or public standpoint, this has been transparent, it's been accessible, and people have had their say or day, in court. And while they may not agree with the outcome, they won't be able to fault the process for that. And from a standpoint of, one, just doing what the right thing is for our constituents, that's important, and it strengthens our legal position for any lawsuits that may come. People can sue us and, claim they don't like the result, but if the process is good and open and intact, we'll be in much better shape. So I think we're making significant progress on that. I appreciate the work that Jeff and Christy and the Ogilvy team have been doing and the cooperation of everybody in the regions. It's sort of a hard transition because it's natural to feel somewhat defensive if you're in the regions about what you've done. And, it's not designed, we're not looking to hang people out. We're looking to do it better. And I feel good about the progress we're making. I think by the next meeting, all of this will be complete. We had a very long list of recommendations from them, which the committee fully supports and is in the report, and made it very clear also that they don't need to wait for us 30 days from now, but to move ahead expeditiously, which they assured us they would do. On the other part of our meeting, which looked at the program management contract, it's still hard to sort of decipher a lot of the stuff. Tony gave us a lot of information. We're in the process of going through that. Rod, who is much more expert in a lot of this stuff than I am, is going to take a look at some of the matrices and other work that's been done so we keep a handle on it. One of the things we want to make sure is that, as we're in this transition in administrations for ourselves, that the work that's going on continues, but I don't want to see, at least my view is we shouldn't see a lot of expedited contracting or dollars going out the door till the new CEO comes on board. And I think that's something that the committee communicated quite clearly, as did other folks, and Tony understands that and knows, I think he appreciates our position. Now, we make a lot of decisions that normally you wouldn't make without a CEO, but given the ARA deadlines and things like that, we don't really have a choice in some of this. But we want to make clear that we're hiring a CEO not to give them a fait accompli about what this project is, but to get their leadership in developing it. And as such, over this next period, we want to be very careful about the expenditures we make. Anything that comes up will go through Kerry. We discussed that. And so I think we're comfortable where we are, but we got to monitor it carefully. And, overall, Tony believes that in the 4 segments that have ARA funding, and we did check to make sure that our timelines are benchmarked against the ARA deadlines. He believes that we're on time to meet those, and we're on track to meet those. Overall, if you look at the whole 800-mile segment, he thinks we're about 11% behind in some things, only because they were started later than others. But in those 4 areas where there is ARA funding, we're on track to meet those deadlines. So.
Very good. Any other input on the Operations Committee report?
Mr. Chairman, I'll add only thank you to the very fine report that Richard provided, that though we were somewhat direct in terms of wanting different formats and some of the material and some of the material presented in different ways, we were very laudatory in terms of the amount of work that the engineering teams have been able to do under the worst circumstances, with periods of time when budgets weren't approved and yet the contractors continued to work and maintain schedule, that they've actually picked up from being 20% behind to being only 11% behind since they did receive the contracts and the funding from as a result of the late budget process. And So there were several very laudatory comments regarding the engineers.
Very good, thank you. On this item, there is a request for a public comment from Ms. Nadia Naik. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Nadia Naik. I'm also from CARD. It's Californians Advocating Responsible Rail Design. I'm here today because the report about the communications problem between the board, Sacramento staff, contractors, and the public pretty accurately reflects the kinds of issues that we're feeling. There's been a tremendous amount of frustration and confusion on the peninsula that comes from conflicting information that the public receives from various board members. CARD has been working really hard to improve communication on the peninsula, and the statements are really adding to the problem. Recently, we've seen a number of editorials. We've heard people on various talk shows on the radio that have said conflicting information. And given the sensitivity around the program EIR that's going to be released, we urge the board to please be very cautious when interacting with the press and the public to avoid any missteps. This type of information is causing confusion and also, frankly, mistrust. So we encourage the board, whenever possible, to speak with one voice, possibly through the chair, in order to avoid these problems. And we also ask that the outreach team really make an effort to kind of correct any misstatements that are accidentally made in these situations to really help and have retractions and corrections. And the other thing I wanted to speak about was I just wanted to make the board aware that as of January 15th, CARD requested through the City of Palo Alto a very long list of information that is really a summary of stuff that we've been asking for several months. The request is submitted January 15th. We still have not received any information. We got some stuff from Caltrain, but we're still waiting from you guys. I don't want to think about what Jeff Barker's email inbox looks like right now, so I know it's very long, but it's been quite a long time, and the faster we get access to information and the more giving that you guys are and the more open you are with the process, I think it would really help the situation. So if you just keep that in mind.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, just
Yes,
on that point,
Mr. Katz.
I appreciate the comments. That is what we're working on, particularly for both board members as well as staff, as well as outreach groups. Consistency in message is important because we want people to have the truth and we want people to know the answers. There's a lot of stuff moving. There's a lot of moving parts in this, and that's hard, which is why we've centralized it through Jeff and Ogilvy. So I think you're going to see a lot of those concerns addressed. The other thing that Ogilvy's doing that I think is very important is, there are a lot of people around the state that support high-speed rail. As in most things, as we all know, folks who oppose stuff are always well-organized because they have a common goal. People who are for stuff are less likely to get organized. So Ogilvy is going to, going to go back to the database and look at where we've received support and making sure that whether it's through an email or a newsletter form or something, we communicate with those folks and keep growing that list of people as well so people know about the progress, know about what's happening. Because the other thing that we all have to deal with, and all of us either working in government or around it, we know people have the expectations don't always match the reality of delivering something. I mentioned yesterday we passed in November of 2008 a sales tax increase in L.A., and people want to know why the subway of the sea is not completed yet. And frankly, we'd like it to be completed, but a year and a quarter is a little bit quick for a project of that magnitude. But nevertheless, there's a public perception. We voted for it. Why hasn't it happened? And where the timelines are longer, like on something like this, I think the idea of giving regular updates to people who are interested in this project will help us deal with that perception. So.
Yes.
Very pleased with that part, but thank you for your
comments. Thank you, Mr. Katz. Mr. Dearvine?
I appreciate Richard's comments, and let me add one other perspective. I think CARD is the best thing that could happen on the peninsula right now, and you folks coming together and trying to focus your comments in an honest way really is a step in the right direction. But just as there have been mistakes made by the proponents, so have there been mistakes made by the opponents, and you know that some of the, especially earlier comments by opponents to the high-speed rail program were blatantly false. And we need to move to the point now where factual information is provided to the public. People of the state of California have voted for a high-speed train system. Our job is to deliver on that vote. We don't know how to do it. That's why we're spending over $100 million for engineering studies up and down the state. We need your help in making that decision, but the help has to be honest help on implementing the people's will. And that's why Jeff has been very, very busy in trying to correct incorrect information. And you need to do that for us, too. when you see one of your supporters presenting information which is non-factual, you need to help in persuading that person not to do that anymore. Otherwise, it blurs the point so that we can't make a good decision for the public.
Thank you, Mr. Dearden. Any other comments on the Operations Committee report? Thank you again, Mr. Katz. All right. Yes, Ms. Alexis put in number 6, but she meant number 5.
Elizabeth Alexis again from CARD. I have some other comments, but I just want to comment on what Mr. Dearden just said. I think our complaint is not about what supporters or private opponents are saying about the project. I mean, I don't think that the board really bears responsibility for any of that. We are mostly concerned about comments that are coming from people who would be seen as official representatives of the High-Speed Rail Authority, whether that's, and in particular, we would actually look at the board, and we are concerned about those comments. I mean, Nadia Nayak just handed around the latest sort of editorial from a board member that's in a local paper, and I mean, the public discourse is just going down and down and down. So on to my comments. First, we would concur with the report, and there's 2 items in particular about the communications report. First is that we think the website could be a better repository for information. Right now, a lot of official authority documents are living on private websites, and while we're happy to contribute bandwidth to the state of California, I don't think that's the best way to communicate information. The second thing is that anything at a public meeting that has a High-Speed Rail Authority logo on it should be on the website, and it shouldn't be up to people like us to sort of dig it up and put it on our website, which is really not the right place. The second thing is we would also concur with a ticket system for logging and responding to public comments and requests. I mean, you guys are going to have to get something very official and something very easy to use. The one thing that we are concerned about is that centralization is one response to sort of the chaos on the ground right now. We would warn you that this may create a very narrow funnel, and already people are getting frustrated that people that used to give them answers are no longer giving them answers. And until you fix the fundamental problem, which is this sort of 4-tiered contractor mess, you're not going to solve your communication problem.
No, and Mr. Katz, I think that's good. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
I appreciate the focus, Mr. Katz, your committee has had, and again, having a communications team and Mr. Barker focusing on that. As everyone knows, Mr. Barker hasn't had that position, nor have we had any position that is a universal position of high-speed rail overseeing external affairs for more than 8 months. So now we do. I appreciate the comments, particularly as they may reflect a positive awareness that we're trying to address the issues that have been issues. But there is still inconsistency in words when it is said that you need to limit the amount of communication that you get, and it needs to be more direct and specific from a couple people, yet people are frustrated because everybody now can't answer all the questions they used to. Those are opposites. So we hear those opposites, and we'll do our very best to live and update a plan. So we appreciate those comments very much. Any other comment on the operations report, Mr. Katz?
Nope.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Then we'll continue on. We were endeavoring to hold a finance committee meeting this month, and we missed that opportunity. It has been, I know the members of the committee want to work this through. Mr. Umberg has been irresponsive to show up when we want him. And as the chair of that committee, I appreciate the committee's interest in wanting to move forward in some of these areas, and specifically Mr. Crane. We were trying to hold this meeting, which we didn't. So the item that was on the agenda was a recommendation or to a financial consultant scope of work. Would you just introduce that item? And I don't know where we necessarily will go from here, but just so the board members know that issue and what we are looking to accomplish.
I'd be happy to, Mr. Chairman, and, whoops. Can you hear me?
It's on the screen.
Thank you. All I can say is, Tom, please hurry back from Afghanistan because the interim chairman of the Finance Committee is doing a very, very poor job. He couldn't even get the logistics right in pulling together a meeting that met with state law. So let me just describe what we wanted to talk about, which is a very important issue. In 2006, the authority issued a request for a proposal to hire a consultant for the development of a financial plan, which was necessary at that time. And we developed, or the authority at that time, I wasn't on the authority then, developed a scope of work to fit its needs during that startup phase. Now we're moving to the financial implementation phase. And the current scope of work that's embodied in that scope of work doesn't capture all the tasks that are required for that phase, which include the development and the implementation of phase-oriented plans, the best ways to aggressively extract value and capital from vendors, governments, and by that I mean local governments, regional governments, federal governments, and foreign governments, extracting the most value from private investors, negotiation services, which are critical to actually implementing a project financing like this. You need someone who's sort of sitting on your shoulder as you're negotiating these deals. Development of criteria for determining the order in which the segments are completed, and more. So we drafted up, or I drafted up, a discussion draft containing an outline of the services that I thought would be important. It's very broad, and if you want, I can just capture those in essentially 4 categories, and I can elaborate on them if people would like me to. First is development of detailed implementation plans for major segments and for the system as a whole, which have to be updated and have to be updated as and when conditions change, which in project financings, conditions change all the time. And if you go back and look at the history of very large public works or private works projects, they're rarely financed the way people thought they'd be financed when they were first envisioned. The second category is you need a financial advisor or implementer who makes recommendations for how best to achieve that implementation on the most favorable terms at the fastest pace and the lowest cost. And that, too, needs to be updated as and when conditions change, which they will do regularly. Then you need someone who will screen, procure, negotiate, and execute the project agreements. And then you need someone who can prepare the detailed materials which are necessary for keeping the legislature up to speed and before we issue any portion of the state bond, which is only a portion of our financing, and for updating the federal government, since they're going to be providing financing to us, and other authorities and other entities that will eventually be providing financing to us. Those are the 4 broad categories. And if we had an in-house sort of CFO who knew project financing, that party could be sort of the chief for pulling all this together, and that party would also need an outside firm to provide implementation services. I think it will likely be our new CEO, who hopefully will have meaningful project financing experience, will be the party with whom those outside agencies, those outside groups will interact. So that, in broad terms, is what I think we need to move to at this point. I also think that it's a decision we should not make until we get the new CEO on board, if that can be done. Ideally, we would have the CEO on board because that person's going to have to live with whatever selection we make in this regard. So with that, I'll be happy to listen to comments, criticisms, additions, etc. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. But thinking this through, I think it would be good to continue the progress on this and have a Finance Committee meeting in conjunction with our April meetings, and in fact have staff continue to work with both of you to bring before this board at least something that we may not wish to issue, but at least move the process along a little further, if that would be acceptable.
See, interim chairman can't even figure out how to use the microphone. That's our plan. We will have a committee meeting by hook or crook before the next meeting.
When you're talking about the financial planning, don't use hook or crook.
Fair enough. Fine. We will have a legal finance committee meeting before the next board meeting, and you will have some recommendations from us by the time that meeting takes place. Thank you.
That's very good. Additionally, I know our current financial team had prepared a presentation to share at the finance meeting, and I have led them on with the concept that we may do it here, but I don't think we're going to. So what I'd like to do, though, is, as they have been working and kind of updating some ideas, if you would also agendize that for that presentation, because I do think some key issues should be refreshed to your committee as well as the whole board, and if we could do that in April, that would be good.
We will do that.
Very good. Any other discussion on the Finance Committee, Mr. Dearden?
Mr. Chairman, very quickly, the report is very hopeful, and I think it shows a need that we probably needed to have filled in the past, but certainly can fill now. But it does broach another issue, and that is the responsibilities of the Executive Search Committee, in that should we look ahead now to recognize that these so-called CFO and other director, sub-director level positions need to be filled very quickly after the chief executive comes in. We need to decide how much involvement the board's going to have in that process, or whether we're going to delegate it all to the new chief executive officer, whether we're going to screen applicants for the chief executive officer. So we need to make that decision when the time, probably sooner than later, so that you know whether your committee needs to be involved in the director level search process.
You're probably right, but I also feel, as Mr. Crane, that it would be great to take that first big step with a CEO, executive director position, and then direct that individual with the charge of coming up with a plan to fill other key spots. Yes, Mr. Kopp.
Mr. Chairman, can interested board members have the written version of the report that
yes, we'll make sure
Mr. Page was
very good
prepared to provide?
Thank you.
Thanks.
If you would, Mr. Page, provide that to the authority secretary so that she can present the written pages for the report to the full committee membership or full board membership. Yes, Mr. Crane.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to ratify the response that you just gave to Rod's question, and that is I would not look forward to filling those additional positions, and I would delegate it to the CEO once we have the CEO.
Yeah,
thank you.
Please don't misunderstand. I wasn't suggesting that we fill the position, but we might be able to give the CEO some head start by identifying a panoply of potential candidates so that he or she can get a head start.
Thank you.
It has to be done pretty quickly.
Okay, we'll try to tackle one hire at a time. There's no other input on the Finance Committee report? Very good. We'll move to item number 7. We will have a fuller discussion of this later in our agenda, but at this point in time, everyone knows that our long-serving executive director will be retiring as of March 31st. This is the last board meeting before he leaves. Therefore, as we endeavor to fill that position, it is still important that we designate an executive director to serve in that interim period. And I would recommend that our deputy director, Ms. Carrie Porvahidi, serve in that role with that authority from the time in which Mr. Morshed retires to the time a new CEO is executive director is brought forward, and that her duties and compensation reflect that position.
I would so move.
Motion by Mr. Dearden, second by Mr. Kopp. Any further discussion in that? Very good. Mr. Morshed, would you be so kind to announce the roll?
Ms. Schenk?
Aye.
Mr. Burns? Aye. Mr. Crane?
Aye.
Mr. Kopp?
Aye.
Mr. Umberg?
Aye.
Mr. Pringle?
Aye.
Mr. Dearden?
Aye.
Ms. Flores?
Aye.
Mr. Katz? Aye. It's unanimous.
Very good. The motion passes. Item 8 is that of the Lausanne Corridor MOU. Mr. Morshed, would you provide a brief report?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. As you know, Lausanne Corridor stretches about 350 miles from San Diego, Los Angeles to San Luis Obispo, and it's the second busiest rail corridor in the nation. And the conventional train, of course, provides service in that area, and the Lausanne Joint Powers Authority consists of all the rail operators and the local governments who are involved in the development and providing of the service. And those entities recently come together and put together a memorandum of understanding among themselves to coordinate their activities relative to providing service, passenger train service in that corridor, and they've requested that the High-Speed Rail Authority join that and sign the same MOU with them, which I would encourage the board to do, because I think, as you all know, that we're going to be working very closely with those operators and entities. We do need to make sure that the overall passenger rail network there is well coordinated and rationalized in a way that provides the maximum service to the public, given a very, very tight corridor and limited amount of space to put railroad tracks in there. So I think being part of that agreement and cooperation is a major benefit to the board, and I would recommend that you approve that. And in addition to that, they requested that the board appointed an ex officio member and a staff member to work with them. So I would recommend those two actions to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Morshed. I was actually thinking about pulling this and not asking the board to address this action now, but Mr. Morshed felt it was important to continue to show to the whole Lausanne corridor our interest in working together. And I think that issue, even though, therefore, signing this existing MOU is consistent, I do think that we need to use this maybe as not a final place, but as a beginning place to address the coordination within that corridor much more directly. There's a lot of service that takes place in that corridor, from the San Diego service to Amtrak, Metrolink, and other operations. And to contemplate in much of that corridor, we're also looking at high-speed rail. It was reaffirmed to me again this month, visiting in the Caltrain corridor, how much stronger there is a relationship between Caltrain and high-speed rail than what we have with San Diego, OCTA, MTA, Metrolink service in that Lausanne corridor. And Mr. Katz and I have been spending much time discussing with our respective counties how important a more comprehensive, coordinated approach could benefit all of us within that Lausanne service area. So even though I feel good that this MOU is just being consistent with the parties that are presently there, I do think we need to be open to hear, and I know that both MTA and OCTA are talking now with Metrolink and other partners to see if there is a much stronger relationship that those areas can have with the High-Speed Rail Authority. So I wanted to bring that up at this time because I believe that we will be hearing back then from those counties as to, or those transportation authorities, as to a higher level of coordinated service focus development, and I think that would be very important to all of us in terms of providing that or maximizing that service in a very limited corridor. Mr. Katz, you have something you want to add on that? No, Katz. Very good.
Mr. Chairman, if I may add to what you suggested, that I want very strongly reinforce your statement that over the past few years, we have been working very cooperatively with Caltrain in the San Jose, San Francisco, and I think, in my view, it's been very beneficial to both high-speed rail and to the commuter service operation there, and we've been able to do things that are beneficial to everybody. In the Los Angeles corridor, that area, that's been lacking. There's often been a view by some entities there that the authority is in competition with their service and so forth. And it is of great assistance, and I want to thank both of you and Mr. Katz, as well as both OCTA and LAMTA, for having really engaged in this process of bringing the parties together and recognizing this is a corridor that needs to be considered as a cooperative corridor, that what's work for the best public, and that the direction that's going, to me, it's a very positive, very important direction. Hopefully, the end result will be something very similar to what the authority has been doing with Caltrain, of looking at it as a corridor that we want to provide the high-speed train, they need to provide commuter corridor, and what's the best way to do that. And that's a very, very positive step in that direction, and I encourage you and I congratulate you for starting that, and hope that all goes well.
Yes, Ms. Schenk.
Yeah, well, coming from the tail end of that corridor, but it's still the sand, as those who have been on the authority and Mady and staff know, that Sandag and the San Diego contingent was initially indifferent, to put the finer spin on it, but they have really come around in the past year and a half. Enthusiastic support and cooperation. I think we saw that in our meeting in San Diego last month, as well as through the various conversations and meetings between the staffs. The support of the mayors along the corridor in the San Diego County area. And so, I think it's all to the good, and appreciate the work that you've done on that, Mady, over the years to bring along the San Diego part of the Los Angeles corridor to be coordinated in that. We may have still a little bit of work to do with the coaster, but I'm confident that will also have very good results in the coming months. So thank you for that.
Very good.
I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Cobb.
On page 8 of the agreement, what's the nature of the relationship to the business plan of the FRA publication and to council? Shouldn't that looks like it's going on 4.5, 5 years old. You've got a new administration, new FRA. Shouldn't that be supplemented with some reference to such further guidelines as are published by the FRA? But what's the relationship of those guidelines to a business plan?
I'm really, I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that. And the only thing I would point out to the board is that this particular MOU that's before us, it's been signed by every entity except the High-Speed Rail Authority. And so I don't think at this time, I wouldn't suggest that we try to change it. Either we accept it as it is, and maybe revisit it later, because the other entities are already in this MOU and proceeding. Whether we join or not, they're still going to proceed. But I don't know what the relationship is.
I raised the question is because I don't want this agreement or any prior agreement to lessen this authority's responsibilities under the law to build and secure operation of high-speed rail in California.
Thank you. Ms. Schenk?
Yeah, I'd move adoption.
Very good. Ms. Schenk moves. Mr. Katz seconds. Any further discussion on this item? Mr. Morshid, would you
Ms. Schenk?
Provide a roll call.
Mr. Burns? Mr. Crane?
Aye.
Mr. Cobb?
Aye.
Mr. Crane? I'm sorry. Mr. Pringle?
Aye.
Mr. Umberg?
Aye.
Ms. Flores?
Aye.
Mr. Katz? And Mr. Dearda?
Very good. Without objection, I'd like to move back to item number 7. I didn't completely state my motion. The motion that we have, I'd like to amend that to further state that upon the selection of a new executive director, Ms. Porvahidi shall be reinstated to her current position at the current level she's at. If there's no objection, to include that as a part of the motion and adopted unanimously.
Or such other level as is established. Current level may be modified. I hope it is.
Well,
It will be at that time.
Right, at that moment.
It will be at that time.
All right.
Later it may change.
All right. The motion, the amendment is such that I read to allow her to go back to that position, and if there's other modifications to that position, she can be treated that way. Very good. Without objection, that would be a part of my motion. Now we would move to item number 9, the long-awaited Vision California presentation that Mr. Levitt said will be no more than 7 minutes. Yes, please.
Good morning, Chairman Pringle, members of the board. The purpose of this agenda item is to present an overview of the Vision California study, which is a joint effort between the authority and the California Strategic Growth Council. In October 2009, the authority was awarded a $1.5 million grant by the Strategic Growth Council to complete the Vision California study effort that was started by the authority. The Strategic Growth Council, which was established by the governor in 2008, is composed of the agency secretaries from Business Transportation Housing Agency, California Human Health Services, California Environmental Protection Agency, and the California Natural Resource Agency, and also includes the director of OP&R and a public member, Robert Fisher, who was appointed by the governor. Vision California is a groundbreaking effort which will provide robust quantifications of the benefits of a more sustainable transit-oriented future for California, one that is anchored by the high-speed train system. Today we're going to tell you more about this study effort and present some initial findings from the first phase of the study. These findings are important in the discussion of how California prioritizes transportation facilities and when cities and counties consider future land use decisions. With the Strategic Growth Council as our partner, this work has a lot of agency support, including support from the administration. The work will be not only useful to the authority, but other state agencies, regional and local agencies, cities, environmental organizations, and the public. All the tools that are being developed are being extensively peer-reviewed and are being open-sourced, which means that they'll be available to other agencies and to the public. I'm very pleased to introduce Peter Calthorpe, principal of Calthorpe Associates, to give an overview of Vision California. Calthorpe Associates is the lead for the Vision California study effort. Peter? Where are you? There you are. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. You know, I think you all deal on many, many levels simultaneously, but I think we all recognize that this the high-speed rail is one of the few truly visionary, long-term, statewide efforts that we have. We tend to deal with issues in this state and this country in a piecemeal manner, and there's no way at the same time that you have to confront the step-by-step, detail-by-detail, place-by-place issues that arise around something as grand as you're endeavoring to put into place. You have to see it in the framework of a long-term history and a statewide context. So the question arises, what is the statewide context? What will the state look like in 2030? What will it look like in 2040, in 2050? And unless we have some sense of that, it's hard to see how high-speed rail fits into that larger program. So the collaboration here between the Strategic Growth Council and yourselves and we hope a growing number of stakeholders is going to be fortuitous in at least beginning to look at and understand the larger context over a larger period of time. How do I do this? There you go. There we go. So here's what we are endeavoring to do here, and it's really an ambitious program. It reaches beyond just high-speed rail, but it's something that we think will support high-speed rail's understanding of how it benefits the state and the community over a large period of time. First is, Nobody has put together land use and transportation data for the whole state of California before. Each region is responsible for that, but there is no comprehensive data set that looks at all these pieces together. Now, there are more individual studies that have been done for high-speed rail that deal with the specifics of its corridor, but the larger context also has to be taken into account, and that's what we're going to be doing here. A new set of analytical tools had to be developed because the kind of detailed travel analysis models that exist today are really too fine-grained to look at large-scale, statewide impacts of different growth scenarios and major infrastructure such as high-speed rail. We will then produce scenarios and metrics and analyze the benefits of different scenarios that we can perceive for the future on high-speed rail. So just to go over those four main steps, we're already a year into this process, and we've gotten basically together most of the data from all the MPOs that the high-speed rail system moves through, which represents, I believe, 93% of the population of this state. Understanding how each one of those MPOs is moving and projecting the future, I think, is important to the efficacy of high-speed rail, and quite frankly, seeing it all together in relationship to AB 32 and SB 375, of course, is part of the picture. Your system is one that binds many, many things in this state together, and that's a good thing. It's a positive attribute. We've developed two tools, or actually we've developed one tool called Rapid Fire, which I'll talk to and use and show you the results of today. The next one, the map-based tool, is much more detailed, fine-grained, but still appropriate for state-level land use transportation analysis on a scenario basis. This map-based model, rather than using single-use land use type zoning that we have in most of our plans today, looks at different place types. There will be 25 of them, maps them onto a GIS base for the whole state of California, and allows us to effectively model different kinds of futures, different kinds of land use and transportation network futures for the whole state. That's coming. That's about 9 months off to where that's really operational. Today, for the short term, we decided to simplify that larger analytical effort into what we call the rapid fire model, which basically says if we mix 3 development types across the state, standard suburban development, infill, and something we're calling compact smart growth, in different proportions, we can get a sense of different impacts, and I'll show you how that plays out. The good news is we can get a whole range of outcomes, both environmental, in terms of transportation, and in terms of fiscal. So you can see here the beginnings of different scenarios of growth. The trend is for outward expansion. We've had this trend for the last 30 or 40 years in the state, where most of the growth is moving out into greenfields surrounding our urban centers. The blueprints that are coming forward from the MPOs are now heading back towards a more compact configuration, and we can model the impacts of these different approaches. The scenarios that we're going to be looking at ultimately, and we can look at in the short term here with rapid fire, are a trend, business as usual, base case, a blueprint, which is really a summation of what the MPOs are producing, and some kind of more compact, more change for the third scenario. In the rapid fire model, we are able to print out impacts from these different growth scenarios that range from, obviously, greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution, which of course has impact on the health of people in the state, water and energy consumption, key variables, transportation, the vehicle miles traveled, and vehicle emissions again, the fiscal impacts of different growth scenarios, and some of the social issues that surround housing, affordability and diversity and accessibility, the relationship between jobs and housing. All these things can be revealed by these different scenarios. Now, all that comes into relationship to the benefits of the high-speed rail investment. What kind of land use world you plug this system into will have a huge impact on the efficacy and the financial efficiency and the importance of your system. And that's what we're seeking to reveal in the final analysis that we put before you. I've stated some of these bullet points already. But the second one is that this particular tool is of interest to many groups in the state. What our physical future looks like and what its economic and environmental and social implications are is a concern of many. And it's a place where we think collaboration between high-speed rail and these other groups, whether they're state agencies or stakeholder groups, can be advanced by having real information rather than anecdotes and stereotypes, which is too often where we seem to end up having our discussions. The linkage to the kinds of high-speed, the kinds of transportation networks at the MPO level is really key for the efficacy of high-speed rail, and I think that'll be one of the more salient results of what we're able to put together. Right now, most of the MPOs are beginning to look at more compact infill development, and a common term now has evolved, the prioritized development areas, effort to focus development where jobs and housing and transit can be most effective. And we're seeing that across the state. And these land use impacts will, of course, impact how the high-speed rail is effective in extending those local transit systems and transit-oriented developments into a statewide network. So now I'd like to just take a minute and show some of the preliminary results. This is the first time that this has been made public, and so I'll take a little bit of time. Maybe it'll be, I hope it won't be too far into the weeds for this group, but I think it's relevant to everybody and specifically high-speed rail. We're looking here at 4 different scenarios. And scenario planning is an approach that says we don't know what the future is going to be, but we can frame up different what-ifs. And by understanding those what-if scenarios, we can get a better handle, a better feeling for the orders of magnitude, the importance of different things, and the range of futures that we should think about accommodating. We do this by creating a double axis. On the top axis are various policies that go to satisfying AB 32, quite literally. But also go to fiscal efficiencies and health issues and a whole range of other things. So under trend policies, we basically let the future unfold based on market forces only. There's no policies about automobile efficiency. There's no policies about greening our utility system. There's no, well, there is a policy about building high-speed rail, and there's policies about building more transit. But we take that as a kind of trend future. Under the green policy scenarios, we're looking at a whole range of efforts that are being put in place by the state of California to begin to reduce our energy dependence and clean up our environment. Now, that is crossed with 3 land use scenarios, one being just typical development as we've seen it for the last 30 or 40 years. One is more mixed, and one we're going to call smart growth. And I'll describe each one of those policies. For this presentation, we're going to just show you trend versus green smart at one end. Now, to get to a land use scenario, we mix different land use types. It starts with urban infill, which we see across the state, the kind of move back to our city centers that our new demographics is generating. And, of course, for high-speed rail, with its stations typically at our city centers, this is a particularly important demographic and economic shift. And the degree to which this happens, the quantity of new households captured by this kind of development will have a direct impact on ridership and efficiency of high-speed rail and, of course, many other forms of health. That's not going to handle growth in California by any stretch of the imagination. There will be greenfield development, and there can be standard suburban low density, and there can be what has emerged now in the marketplace in a very powerful way, mixed-use, walkable, more compact, but still largely single family. So an example here is a project in Denver, Stapleton, the reuse, which is largely single family but has walkable town centers and mixed-use environments combined with single family homes and schools and parks and open space. It basically satisfies the same market that we've been satisfying for the last 20 or 30 years with more disaggregated land use patterns. So here's how we build a scenario. Business as usual, 70% standard growth, low density, suburban, 25% compact, say like Stapleton, and only 5% infill. And that has been the historic trend. Now, just for the sake of scenario building, we're not predicting anything here, and we're not mandating anything. We're just saying, what if the state grew by 55% Stapleton-like growth and 35% infill and only 10% the standard growth patterns that we've had over the years. And that's what we'll look at. First is to look at, well, what does that mean in terms of the kind of housing we're providing for the state? It's a lot more small lot and townhouse development under that particular scenario, which many economists are now saying is exactly what the market needs. The market overbuilt large lot remote single family, and it needs to backfill for many first-time buyers and for many empty nesters. It needs to backfill a more affordable and more compact housing type. So there are many that validate that. What's fascinating is that when you blend the increment between now and 2050 of this quote-unquote smart growth scenario, we still end up with 56% of households in California being single-family detached, as opposed to around 64% today. So it's not a radical shift, as many people would expect. Now, we look in our work at the forces behind these land uses. And when we look at demographics today, over 77% of households in California are not married couples with children. They have many other needs. The empty nesters, the single parents, the singles living alone, which in the United States now is the largest household type. This represents a major shift in the kind of housing we need, which will trickle back to the kind of development we get, which will then trickle back to the kind of transportation systems we want to invest in, which will then impact how high-speed rail interacts with all of the above. So I think that it's a long chain, but I hope it's one you appreciate. I walked through this already. These green policies that CARB and the California Energy Commission, the Strategic Growth Council, I think most of the people here are familiar with. But they're aggressive. And if we really are serious about AB 32 in the state, they're going to have to be aggressive. We're going to have to get to an average fleet of automobiles at around 54 miles per gallon. Now, that's in the year 2050. If we can't innovate our way to that point, I think we're going to be in a lot of trouble. But this is obviously a debate that can be had. So once again, remember, this is a what-if scenario. This is not a mandate. Now, this was supposed to come up one at a time. Unfortunately, we have a different technology here. So let me walk you through this, because this graph is the heart of the matter. 1990, what you see there is the amount of carbon emissions from buildings over the amount of carbon emissions in the state of California from travel in 1990. And that's the benchmark for most of the global climate change issues. As a matter of fact, the line doesn't even come through it, unfortunately. If we did wait a minute, is there more? Oh, there we go. So that is the AB 32 sets out a target, a goal, not a policy, a goal, that by 2050 we'll get to 80% of 1990. You see that yellow line is what we're chasing. It's pretty radical and ambitious. And perhaps we can all debate whether appropriate or not. Trend puts us way beyond that. And that's just taking today's per capita carbon emission from the kind of house we live in and the amount we drive and the kind of car we drive. That's trend 2050, the next bar. Business as usual is different. We do know that market forces, rising costs of energy, and many other things are going to begin to shift, and just the natural evolution of and innovation of our technology around building energy efficiency and auto efficiency is going to bring that number down. So we have the BAU, the business as usual number, and it's come down a fair way. Now, if you had it in, you shifted from the land use patterns of 70% standard and only 5% infill to that smart growth scenario I described, you'll notice that you cut the red bar, the transportation bar, in half, practically, just by changing land use behavior, because you've really profoundly impacted the amount that people have to travel. They can live in communities where they just have to put less miles on their car. They have more opportunity to walk. They have more opportunity to use transit and other mechanisms. So VMT comes down, and that with it a whole range of other co-benefits. You'll note that the blue bar also is moderated somewhat because more compact buildings are inherently more efficient in terms of energy and therefore carbon emissions. But it's clearly not where we, so land use alone doesn't get us to our AB 32 target. The next bar is plus efficient vehicles. So if we get to that 55 mile per gallon auto fleet, we will cut the red bar in half again. And if we go to low carbon fuels, which is also a policy of the Air Resources Board, we'll cut it again. And we'll be getting, that's the one that's labeled low carbon fuels. Now, we still need to do something about the buildings out there. And so then there's building efficiency and then greening our utilities and getting more green electrons, renewables into that. You can see at the end, we're not quite there, but we're a long way along the path. And so that's what this kind of scenario analysis can do. Now, there's a whole range of co-benefits. The world doesn't revolve around carbon emissions. It revolves around a whole complex of issues. Yeah, well, some people think it will, but, I think the point that there are other implications. When you solve one problem, you either generate a whole raft of unintended consequences or co-benefits. I mean, sometimes you have positive feedback loops where solving one problem also solves others. Well, in the more compact future, we're saving 3,800 square miles of open space, ag land, and our precious resources in California. Today, the urban footprint of all of us in the state is around, I think, 5,300 square miles. So you'll note here that the increment for business as usual is to double the urban footprint physically in the state. And, of course, smart growth, which in the end still leaves us with over a majority of single-family homes in the state, is much more conserving of open space. And I think that's a critical issue for many. Costs. As you spread out, the more linear miles of road you build and the longer you spread those utilities, the more it costs. It's around $24,000 more per household to go on the business as usual scenario as opposed to the smart growth. And that's a very important number for many people in California struggling in the context of housing affordability. As I already talked to, the average VMT per household would go down in a more compact transit-oriented future. How much? We figure over 10,000 vehicle miles per household per year. Today, in California, the average household travels around 24,000 vehicle miles a year. Excuse me, not a day, a year. We see under business as usual that climbing because the more we spread out, the greater the distances are. So it goes up a minor amount to 28. But under a compact future that is supported by high-speed rail, you can bring it way, way down to 17,000. That then leads to the amount of fuel consumption, which is a very big number and has all sorts of other implications that I won't get into right here. But for the average household, that's about a $4,000, over $4,000 saving just in fuel expenditures today. Building energy shows the same pattern. We have more compact and we have more efficient buildings in this future. Water, not a trivial issue for this state. And as we spread out, we have more lawns to water, and we consume more water per household. And 2/3 of Lake Tahoe is actually a very big number. We couldn't. It's multiples of the bay itself, the San Francisco Bay. So this is another critical variable. And land use, transportation, and high-speed rail are where all these issues intersect. It's hard to simply isolate these things, and I think it's very important to see them all brought together, which is hopefully what this modeling effort will be able to do, or is doing right now. The annual savings per household, when you add up energy savings in the building and in transportation, around $13,000. That buys you actually a pretty good chunk of mortgage money, if you actually can get the bank to make a loan to you these days, which is getting more and more difficult. But that goes to the affordability issue, which will always, I think, be a critical challenge for our state. So the greenhouse gas emissions I've already spoken to. These savings are equivalent to underwriting a forest 2/3 the size of the state of California. That's if you wanted to create a carbon sink that was equal to this difference, you'd have to basically plant and raise a forest that's almost the size of our own state. So conservation first is really one of the most profound strategies, and embedded in all this is less of the new glitzy technology that people are most excited about, the solar collectors and all the rest of that, and the simple thing of how we shape our communities and how we travel around our communities really can have the greatest impact. So sometimes I worry that this is not directly related, but it is profoundly related to what you're doing. And it also demonstrates this understanding that if we want to think at this scale in this state of California, we have to see how all the pieces interact. And that's how you build coalitions. And I think that's partly why the people of California are so much behind high-speed rail, because they see it as a manifestation of a much larger vision of how the state can and will grow. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Katz.
Almost applause.
Oh, come on, you didn't think you were going to totally out scot-free. No, first, Peter, it's good to see you again. Thank you very much. One, I would really appreciate from the staff a PowerPoint, if I can get a copy of the PowerPoint.
Well, it's going to be on your website.
Great. Hopefully I can navigate
We'll try and
that.
fix a couple of the glitches in it, but it'll be right there.
Appreciate that. Fascinating data, as always, and great thinking. And one of the questions I have is, this is working through, you're going to be, your work on this will be complete, you said about 9 months? Is that what?
Joe, why don't you come up here and share the podium with me for these questions? About a year, 9 months to a year.
Okay. I just want to make sure we get it in time to use it appropriately, because that's always some of the problems that, that's always that tension between the really good quality research and data and getting it in a timely enough fashion for decision makers to do what we got to do. There's great stuff in here. I think you have set out a very good case and want to make maximum benefit of your work. So,
once this tool is constructed, High-Speed Rail Strategic Growth Council, who's co-sponsoring this, can come to us and various other technicians and ask about any different kind of scenario that they want to see. So this is going to be an interactive design tool. It's not just a one-time analysis that results in a fixed set of data. And so that capacity to iterate at the statewide level, I think, is going to be the greatest outcome of this.
No, I have not seen anything that comes close to this that looks at it, as you said earlier, from a total land use standpoint. I mean, one of the things that brought to mind when we were talking is I know one of the things on the table this year is their budget solution across the street is elimination of the Williamson Act, just from a dollar standpoint, which when I looked at your numbers about urban land and open space, eliminating the Williamson Act runs contrary to everything you're talking about in here in terms of what the future may hold. So there's a lot of different applications for this data that I think are critical to decision makers. So thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Mr. Crane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a question. It's a great presentation and great data. But what I don't understand is how is it supposed to inform us with respect to policy or other issues that we're faced with in the future? In other words, how does this help me make a decision about how to vote on something we're going to be coming up with or facing over the next 12 months or 24 months?
You are designing a system for the future. It'll be in place. I won't even begin to wonder exactly what year. But creating hypothetical futures will impact, very literally, ridership numbers. I mean, more people who are closer to the stations, your stations, and to state feeder transit systems. I mean, when you see the network that's being produced in Los Angeles, we have these transit networks. If transit systems are radiating out from the city center and the high-speed rail central location, access is easier, ridership increases. it impacts your whole relationship park and ride. How you phase your park and ride facilities and when it's phased out, land use will have a huge impact on that. If we have a business as usual future, you're going to have most people driving to your station, and it's going to have a lot of other impacts.
So the sorts of questions that I'm going to be faced with are, for example, when we're talking about where we should locate our stations, we should locate them where they're in more densely populated areas so people don't drive there, or closer to rail networks that are already operating so there can be more. Is that the sort of way that I can use this information?
Yeah, and I think that the environmental impacts of the system will vary given different land use scenarios. But yes, I think one of the key elements will be the most effective station location in relation to other transit systems at the MPO level. And then, of course, every MPO will be designing around where you are. So it's an interactive back and forth thing. Where high-speed rail chooses to locate a station will impact how they shape their local feeder system. That will then impact the various economic development strategies. You know, if the station is in the city historic center that may be a little depressed, there's economic development there that results from both the station location and, of course, the feeder transit networks. So, in a very practical level, that's how it sorts itself out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dearline.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to ask a question similar to David's, but on the other side of it. And as David knows, we have been strongly encouraging all of the station locations to be in the downtown cores, Peter. And by the way, I should precede my comment by complimenting you as being the oracle of smart growth and TOD for, goodness, 30 years that I recall clear back of regional government. So we're honored to have you here before us today. But in California, as in many places in the United States, land use is controlled by the cities. In our instances, because we're going to be downtown, the counties aren't going to be involved, it'll be the cities. And so as much as we push and we try to develop our system in the downtown cores and encourage the creation of feeder and distribution systems to support your concepts, we're going to have cooperation from the cities, which is tough, as you know, sometimes, to create the infill that's required because of the NIMBY response to infill. So I hope, and if there's a way for us to help you, I'm sure we would want to, I hope that you can get to the League of Cities and Conference of Mayors to communicate this very good information to allow them to be partners with us as we try to create the future.
Well, I think that's exactly the point. You guys don't operate in a vacuum. There's a whole series of collaborations with various stakeholder groups that have to happen in order to make all these things more effective investments for the people of California. And quite frankly, you know, I'm personally obviously very sympathetic to the idea that these are catalysts for downtown development. And certainly there is always local control, but the forces at play on land use policy are complex and they're multifaceted. I think we've seen a profound shift in market forces. The development community is now pro-infill, more compact, pro-walkable. You see the ULI is now, one of the greatest advocates of smart growth, interestingly enough. So, and all they're doing is reflecting the market force, the preference. So the preference, that's one vector of force. There's the kinds of investment the states and the feds make. And so as you invest in high-speed rail and the feds and the state invest in local transit networks, I think you'll see a different set of forces emerge there. And then finally, we do have SB 375, and there is a new force on local land use policy that will be emerging from those policies. So it's always difficult. Change is always slow. But I think it is inevitable, and when we look over the long term, I think we can see, at least we can paint a picture of various outcomes and what the implications will be.
Yes, Ms. Schenk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an excellent presentation and helps continue to stretch our thinking. And I will say, back in the early 80s, I know when you were doing this, I was the Secretary of Business, Transportation, and Housing. There was a reason that agency was created to integrate economic development, transportation, and housing. And you couldn't use the word infill to developers back then. They didn't want to hear it. So, good that it's only taken 30 years, but, we're at a good point now. My question to you is really building on what others have said. As we have traveled to other countries where high-speed rail is quite well developed, we've seen that there are stations that are not in the downtown areas, and we're going to have stations that are not going to be in the downtown areas. We see the economic development and the housing that takes place around where the stations are. And so are you going to be looking at that as you look at where we ultimately are beginning to locate our stations?
Yeah. I think there's going to be a whole companion set of studies that will come online with us. For example, one would be economic catalytic development. As you move through the Central Valley, for example, station areas will, I think, be prime locations for major employment centers because certain kinds of jobs are going to say, it's going to be great if I can get on the train and 2 or 3 hours later I'm at a meeting in some other part of the state. From a business standpoint, you have catalytic. So economic development will be one dimension that will be meshed here. I think we have to first draw these large-scale implications and then drill down to the specifics of each station location and its configuration and its land use. But make no mistake here, I think the immediate walking area is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the impact of high-speed rail on our growth patterns. Certainly, the TODs right at the stations are going to be important, and there's going to be that balancing act of parking versus development, and that's going to go on, and it's not one answer fits all, and it's not, at one moment in history it can be one thing, another it can be something else. But it's that outreach beyond that central location, how it fits into a larger connectivity strategy that each city and each MPO is going to have to evolve, I think will be really systemic and very powerful.
Well, thank you. I too am fascinated by all of these things because coming from my perspective in my city, we have a large focus that way. I think that what Ms. Schenk points out is the need to really have this cross messaging with our entire team, and where we may miss that sometimes. For example, parking models at stations right now that are driving costs of stations we are talking about are based upon old parking models, not on current land use needs. So if you are building a station that has a very concentrated development around there in a TOD fashion, I don't know if we are necessarily putting that response into how much we are requiring of parking and capacity. Similarly, I think a lot of decisions that have been made over the last number of years of the authority may very well have taken away some of the great leveraging you're pointing to in terms of locations of stations or capturing value out of those stations to return that value back to high-speed rail. And as Mr. Dearden pointed out, a lot of that is land use decisions made up by the local government. Some local governments don't want to do it. In our city, in L.A., and certainly San Jose and San Francisco, they have created land use patterns around those stations that will be relatively dense and significant. But at this moment in time, high-speed rail is not going to capture the benefit of that necessarily in an economic value. Or, if we can, we need to have our financial teams look at where each of those stations, what is left of a financial benefit that we can contemplate at capturing. So I do see a very valuable level of awareness from our engineering team, the direction that is given to each of the engineers in the field as to taking a look at what is happening at those stations and not necessarily treating every station the same. And our finance team, how do you bring value out of those stations and some of those decisions that would be a long-term benefit to the authority and operation. So I appreciate this perspective, and it was a very nice presentation.
And just one final comment. Don't forget, this is a collaboration with the Strategic Growth Council of the State of California and yourselves. And I think that's particularly fortuitous because the way they see a whole range of investments can either enhance the performance and efficacy of high-speed rail, or it can take away from it. And so just the fact that there's this common ground collaborative project between the major departments in the state of California and how they're thinking about the most efficient way to invest state dollars, whether it's in water systems or transportation systems or health systems, I think is a big positive for your effort.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I know there are 5 people who asked to be heard on this, and if it's acceptable with the authority, I'd like to ask these people to limit their comments to 2 minutes each. So first, Dr. Clever. Following that, Ms. Victoria Rome. Yes, sir.
Chairman Pringle, members of the board, my name is Reinhard Cleaver, and I'm the co-author of a book on high-speed rail, the competitive advantage of high-speed rail. The reason I'm here today is because I'm a little bit concerned that the state of the practice in Europe does not appear to be considered right now for one of the greatest high-speed rail systems in the future in the world. And what I'm talking about is, at the moment, the state of the practice, by and large, in the United States is intermodal terminal, which means that all modes of transportation come together at the same place. That's spatial integration. Now, it's very clear what the next step would be, which is all modes of transportation come together at the same place, in the same terminal, at the same time. And that's temporal integration. And that's being used very extensively in Switzerland right now. And it's very important that this is being considered right now, because let's just look at a BART station. Everybody knows what BART stations look like in the Bay Area. That's exactly what a pulsed hub system station would not look like. You know, people coming from all ends of the platforms, going through one central faregate area, and then moving to all ends of the bus station. That would just take simply too long. The other thing is, if high-speed trains and local trains want to catch up with each other at the same time and exchange passengers, we have to know exactly what times we need and what speeds we need and what the turnout speeds is and what the curve radius is. And what I'm suggesting is that the High-Speed Rail Commission just keep that option open to, in the future, have a pulsed hub system in California, which would mean we have not only high-speed rail, but we also have buses coming in on all state highways. And that would be a tremendous advantage politically.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'd like to ask Ms. Victoria Rome and Mr. Bernstein following that. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, Chairman Pringle and members. My name is Victoria Rome. I'm with the Natural Resources Defense Council, or NRDC. I'm here to just say congratulations and support your decision to invest in the Vision California project. As you have seen this morning, it's a critical tool that can help California's citizens, planners, local governments, decision makers to see the full range of benefits that will come from improved land use and transportation planning. If done right, high-speed rail will make an important contribution to California's meeting its environmental and economic goals. NRDC supported Prop 1A, and we're very happy to see that it passed because we believe that high-speed rail can make an important contribution to a clean, safe, and thriving future for California. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Bernstein, then Mr. Cohen.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the authority. My name is Autumn Bernstein, and I am the Director of Climate Plan, which is a statewide coalition of nonprofit organizations, including environment, public health, and social equity advocates, working together to advance sustainable communities across California. We are strongly supportive of the Vision California project, and we applaud your leadership in moving this very visionary effort forward. We think it's significant not just for the high-speed rail project itself, but also for the many myriad decisions that are being made on a daily basis here in California that impact our future as far as where we put new infrastructure and how we grow. So having this tool in the public domain to provide information about the greenhouse gas benefits and the open space benefits and the public health benefits and implications of different decisions, I think will be a very significant step forward for the public discourse in terms of how we make decisions about projects of this nature. We look forward to working with you and your staff to see the project through to completion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cohen, and then Mr. Schonbrunn.
Good morning, members. My name is Stuart Cohen. I am executive director of a group named Transform. When I did some work for you, I was with the Transportation and Land Use Coalition. Same group, we got a new name. We supported high-speed rail as a bond measure and got other groups to support it, but not because we thought this was going to replace a lot of Southwest trips. The reason we really believed in high-speed rail and continue to is because of its potential to shift land use patterns in this state. As you all know, highway and airport expansion, the focus of our investments for the last 40 years, has been a primary driver, for sure the largest public investment in subsidizing current development patterns. And high-speed rail can be the largest investment in re-energizing our city centers and bringing back economic activity there. But it has to be done right. That is the reason that I'm so excited that you invested in Vision California. Vision California clearly shows the benefits of thinking where we can go in 2050, but by itself, Vision California is not going to get you as the authority what you need. It needs to be the catalyst for a lot of other collaborations, as Peter was mentioning. I'll just give you a short example. In the Bay Area, we used to spread our MPO's money like peanut butter, grants, bike ped projects. They now are focusing those investments near their future transit stations through a very deliberate process that we're calling priority development areas. The High-Speed Rail Authority can work with collaborative partners, make sure the other MPOs continue to do that around high-speed rail stations. So with Vision California, I think you've got that tool to do that engaging and inspire folks about the potential impacts. A final kind of warning and hopefully opportunity is, I think, given some of the things that have been happening around the segments, some of the resistance from communities, you may end up, as we get along to the station area planning at 24 stations, run into the same resistance. We've got a project in the Bay Area called the Great Communities Collaborative, engaging communities from the get-go on what those station areas will look like. We're going to be working on the Diridon station, and we'd love to talk to your staff about how to make sure that happens well at other stations.
Thank you very much. Mr. Schonbrunn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for hiring my hero, Peter Calthorpe. I wanted to provide a response, or three responses actually, to Directors Crane and Diridon in terms of the relationship between land use authority of local agencies and the larger good that will come from the Vision California analysis showing the importance of smart growth. There's three different models that I'd like to offer you. The first is something that MTC adopted 13 years after we proposed it, which is their transit-oriented development thresholds. They will not commit funding for construction for a project unless that project meets specific number of housing in each station area averaged out over the project. So they thereby transfer a responsibility to local agencies to perform. Another possibility would be setting minimum zoning standards so that the authority says we will not put a station in this location unless you meet certain qualifications. And those ought to be timed or trained for each location, but they should be set to result in performance. And then a third option came out of the League of Women Voters of the Bay Area that recognized that station areas represent a unique resource, in some ways similar to San Francisco Bay itself, for which the Bay Conservation and Development Commission was formed, The idea that was put forward by the league is that there ought to be legislative authority to have specific land use oversight over developments within given station areas. And this would be potentially a legislative proposal that you would bring to the legislature, seek authorization to get, and that way the station areas would perform adequately. Our biggest fear is that there will be unduly low densities in station areas and completely lose the opportunities that they've created.
Thank you, sir, for your comments. All right, seeing no other information on this subject, thank you very much for this information item, number 9. We will now move to the next item on our agenda, number 10. Mr. Levitt, welcome back.
Thank you. This will be brief.
Thank you.
To comply with the court judgment in the town of Atherton litigation, in December, you adopted Resolution HSRA 10-0-12, which rescinded your July 2008 certification of the Bay Area to Central Valley Program EIR. That resolution also rescinded your prior approval of the Pacheco Pass alignment, which serves San Francisco and San Jose, utilizing the Caltrain corridor, as well as your preferred station locations. In response to your direction, we have prepared a document to address those areas that the court identified as needing additional work. That document includes clarification that the alignment alternative between San Jose and Gilroy will be located adjacent to and not in the Union Pacific Railroad's mainline right-of-way. The conclusion that the alignment alternative between San Francisco and San Jose and between San Jose and Gilroy would have somewhat higher potential property impacts than previously disclosed in the final program EIR. The conclusion that UPRR's statements indicating that it's not willing to allow HST to use its right-of-way presents challenges for both Pacheco Pass alternatives and Altamont Pass alternatives, but that these challenges are somewhat greater for the Altamont Pass network alternatives. And finally, the conclusion that the new and revised information does not change the staff recommendation in the 2008 program EIR for the preferred alignment and station locations. Following your direction from Resolution 10-012, we are making the revised draft program EIR material available on our website by the close of business today. And the official CEQA public comment period will begin on March 11th and will last for 45 days up till April 26th. The document, we're making it available a week before the official comment period starts so that you and the public will have access to it while its duplication and its mailing takes place. Comments can be received by the authority by mail, fax, or by email. Our plan is to have a public meeting to be held to receive comments on the revised draft, and at this point the meeting is expected to take place on April 7th. And we're thinking San Jose is a likely location. That would be the day before the next board meeting. At the close of the public comment period, staff and consultants will prepare responses to the comments that we receive to be included in a revised final program EIR material document. This final document will be made publicly available and will be brought back to you at a future board meeting, along with the 2008 final program EIR for a new decision on certifying the EIR and selecting a preferred alignment and station locations.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Levitt, for that update and that information. Any comments of the authority board? Seeing none, we have a couple comments from individuals. And again, if I may request that the speakers limit their comments to 2 minutes. Ms. Rita Westby. Then why don't we move to Ms. Elizabeth Alexis, and then Ms. Nadia Naik. And then we'll hear from Ms. Westby at the end.
Good morning, members of the board again. Elizabeth Alexis from CARD. So one of the thing I want to mention this morning, in the document that was just posted about the ridership studies, it mentions that the ridership data was not actually used to make a decision on the routing. And I would actually say that's a problem. And that's one of our problems with the ridership study itself, is that because of its flaws and deficiencies, it should be giving you very valuable information upon upon about the differences between these two routes. We do not have a view on which route is better, and our view is simply that there is not sufficient information at this point to make that decision. And given that you sort of get a redo on this one, you get to do the program level again. I'm sure everyone is thrilled. This would be a great opportunity to really get a ridership study that would give you that information to tell you what is the land use implications of going one way or the other. So just in summary, I mean, take this opportunity to do it right. It doesn't happen every day. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Ms. Nick?
Hi, Nadia Nayak again with CARD. It's unclear from the memo exactly what is going to be released. Obviously, they said it's going to be out by business day today, but it sounds like it's going to be just revised materials, and we'd like to just ask that when they put things on the website, it show not just the revised materials, but the entire EIR. As the board knows, under CEQA, the public has the opportunity to comment on the entire report, not just the revised part, and it would be very helpful when we're dealing with the constituents and trying to help them understand how they can talk about it effectively. The other thing is the new materials could really be misconstrued if the authority doesn't make it clear that they can comment on the entire document. So if you guys could put something out that really stresses that would be very helpful. The memo that was put out also said that the authority was going to notify everyone who commented on the June in 2007 report. We're hoping that what they meant to say was that they will be telling not only those people, but also the exhaustive list of stakeholders that have now been fleshed out with CSS and all the other processes. So we're hoping that it will be a much larger list. And that they will try to make sure that they tell not everyone that's actually adjacent to the right-of-way, but within a half mile of the right-of-way, since there's really been a lot of interest. And also, we really suggest having more than just one meeting on this topic. There were a lot of meetings scheduled for the alternatives analysis, but it seems like there might only be one meeting for this, and obviously this has been highly anticipated, so we would really urge you in terms of outreach so that you don't run the risk of being told that you had a lot of outreach meetings for the AA and not for the program level, to really make the best effort to make sure we have as many meetings as possible. And specifically, I would urge you to meet with the Peninsula Cities Consortium. They've had a pretty loud voice, and I think that would be a great forum for you guys to bring forth this new information. Thank you.
Thank you very much on all your comments. Ms. Westby.
Hi, I'm Rita Westby, also from CARD, and unfortunately we didn't coordinate our talks as closely as, I'm going to duplicate a little bit of what Nadia Nayak has said about the outreach and the notification, and just to make sure that you do include the past and current stakeholders. And I think the stakeholder list has grown since 2009. We have the scoping comments report, so that will be one place to look for more stakeholders. And of course, the outreach team has been building their list of stakeholders since then as well. Then I'd like to also point out to other EIRs and other segments, and perhaps we can learn from and copy what works. And there's a section, Merced to Fresno, where their public notification, I'm just going to read off of their draft scoping report, they rely on past work and current project outreach and to property owners within 50 feet of each side of the proposed alignments and 500 feet of proposed station locations. And there's another one, Bakersfield to Palmdale, which pretty much repeats that same thing. So be nice to have, somewhat uniform notification, and we would love to have that same type of notification with this new EIR. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of item 10. Any further comments by the board? Yes, Mr. Kopp.
Through the chair to Ms. Brown. Ms. Brown, have you heard all of the comments, the report by Mr. Levitt? Have you heard the comments and the report before that of Mr. Levitt? Yes. All right. In your opinion, as a Deputy Attorney General, does this process that was set forth by Mr. Levitt comply fully with the California Environmental Quality Act?
It does thus far, and we expect to continue to advise the authority and its staff on compliance with CEQA and satisfying the need to address issues identified by the court in the City of Atherton case, Town of Atherton.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion on this item? This was an information.
Next item.
This is an information item only. So we'll move on to members' reports. Mr. Kopp has a members' report update, but any other members? Mr. Dearden?
I'm sorry, did you want to go first?
No, I'm going to have him go last on the members' reports.
Let me comment on two issues and then make a remark on Mady very briefly.
Well, then I've changed my mind.
Well, let me stick with the two issues that are not related to Mady then.
Thank you.
The two issues that relate to Mady, that do not relate to Mady, are that the California State University system has convened a task force to look at ways of satisfying the employment needs for high-speed rail. And in addition to that, the U.S. Department of Transportation has asked the Mineta Institute to conduct a comprehensive needs assessment, workforce needs assessment for the nation's 13 high-speed rail corridors to determine the unique education skills required to floor this new transportation system for America. Both of those things are proceeding at no cost to the High-Speed Rail Authority, and but they will need full cooperation from the authority staff in order to be able to estimate the employment requirements. And I'm asking that that be provided. And I think that's all.
Very good. We are going to make sure Mr. Kopp is going to introduce the recognition we would all like to have of Mr. Morshed, but other than that recognition, any other member comments at this time? All right.
Related to me.
Yes. Mr. Kopp.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members, as everyone notes, we've gathered for a regular monthly meeting of the universally acclaimed California High-Speed Rail Authority Board, not to execute the equally acclaimed executive director, who understandably relinquishes his multifarious responsibilities 3 weeks from tomorrow, but to proclaim California's gratitude, its thanks, and its acknowledgement of his almost singular creation and nurturing of high-speed rail in California. Most here knows his inspirational biography. Ran to Cal State Hayward, the University of California, Caltrans, State Senate Transportation Committee. Some know his acute qualities of heart and mind, which spawned high-speed rail legislation, and his devotion to selfless, persistent advancement of intellectual honesty, taxpayer protection, transportation progress for gasoline and sales taxpayers and users of roads, rights-of-way, and airports. I lavish panegyrics on Mady Morshed for board members and all who realize his beneficent deeds and measured, imaginative implementation of the current incarnation of an example of his farsightedness for California. Mady Morshed, as Senate Transportation Committee Staff Director, recommended to me a bill in 1992, vetoed by the then governor, its 1994 successor, approved by the governor, the 1996 capstone establishing the authority. He did not accrue coin of the realm for doing so. He did accrue recognition and continuing respect of his acuity and probity in furthering our collective aspiration. He leaves us bereft of honest, informed management of our state's largest ever non-military project. He may be replaceable as manager. He cannot be replaced for his intuitive wisdom and worldly understanding of Californians' transportation needs. We honor his service with thanks, and we jointly and severally thank him also for his character, his benevolent stewardship, and his unending dedication to the people of the state of California.
Of course, every member of the authority would like to be heard in recognizing you, so thank you, Mr. Kopp, for that fine, very difficult to understand presentation. Ms. Schenk.
Yeah, I was going to inquire if we're each allowed a moment
Yes, ma'am.
of reflection. Well,
And
thank
we'll start
you.
here and move across the dais.
Start?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and you're quite right. No one can really follow that erudite proclamation, so I'll try to just say it in straighter English. There have been occasions when I've been called the mother of high-speed rail, and not always as a compliment. But, Mehdi, not to get our respective spouses into a position of misunderstanding, I won't call you the father of high-speed rail. But you certainly are the godfather of high-speed rail in California. You are the single most important individual in having brought the dream of high-speed rail to reality. And history will reflect that high-speed rail in California owes its existence to you as one person. Going back to the early 80s, when your hair was jet black. This has been a dream that you've pursued, that you've brought us all to this point. We're all indebted to you. And as your longtime friend, I will miss you as executive director, but I know that we will continue our friendship. And thank you for all that you've done.
Thank you. Mr. Burns?
I'm not going to try to even turn this on. Mehdi, I want to thank you. I'm, one of the newest members of the board here. Every time I've had a phone call into you, you've responded extremely quickly to help bring me up to speed, taking time out of your day to even sit down and speak with me whenever I've asked as well. You're going to be sorely missed. I'm sure if Tom Stapleton was with us still today, he'd be, preaching the same thing to you that I am. And again, hopefully I see you in a different capacity going forward. And it was a real honor and pleasure to work with you while I was here and you were here.
Mr. Crane?
All I can express is envy, because it must feel wonderful to have the legacy that you have, and to know that the rest of your life that legacy will be under construction and eventually completed. I mean, it's a remarkable legacy for someone to have after their name. So I congratulate you for getting it going, and on behalf of my children and grandchildren and others who will benefit enormously from high-speed rail in California, I thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Umberg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May, I've been blessed to have known you for almost 20 years now, and you're one of the great heroes of California transportation. And I very much look forward to the day when we all take that high-speed train from Los Angeles to Anaheim. You're in the front of the train with your children, your grandchildren, and I have an opportunity to tell them how that wouldn't have been possible without your leadership and your dedication. So it's been an honor and a privilege to serve with you. Thank you, Nate.
Ms. Flores?
Mary Morshed,
met him 8 years ago when I first came on the authority, and I have to say I've continually counted on Mehdi to answer any questions outside of the board meetings because that's just how I work. So I just wanted to say, Mehdi, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. I can't say I knew him when he had black hair. I just knew him when he had more hair. But that goes for both of us. So I just want to thank Mehdi. I think you'll always be there for me, I know, to answer any questions that just come from a person who wants to make sure that we serve California the best way that we can with the transit system that is so sorely needed. And you have seen, so much in all of your years. I am particularly thinking about when I chaired in 2005, and we did sign an MOU with the Japanese delegation, and that was a ceremony. We had to practice for it. So I'm grateful for all of your help. You're a good friend. You'll remain a friend. And we're not going to lose contact with Mehdi. We're all going to ride this train together. Thank you.
Mr. Deardon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also have known Mehdi, it seems like, for all of our lives as a junior legislative staffer myself at one time up here, seeing this oracle walking around and everybody paying attention to him. And know that Lynn's comments are very accurate in terms of the responsibility for this system. Continuously throughout the process, Lynn got us started at the federal level. Quentin certainly carried the ball at the state level. But the one who was there as the glue that held it all together through the difficult times and through the times when nobody would even talk to us about high-speed rail was Mehdi. And during those times when the budget difficulties were so tight in the past, and we didn't have the bond funds to rely upon, we would have gone under had we not had Mehdi's acumen with the legislative organizations that allowed the funding to continue to flow. And certainly the responsibility for delivering this system will be Mehdi's. And Mr. Chairman, when the appropriate time comes, it's not agendized for action today, but I'd like to propose that, as with the great leaders of rail systems throughout our time, Leland Stanford started the Central Pacific Railroad, and they named the Stanford, the first locomotive on the Central Pacific after Leland Stanford, and then the Harriman locomotive was named, and so on. And I'd like to propose that the first locomotive in our system be named the Mooreshed. We will.
Or the Mehdi. I mean,
well, one end and the other end.
I think that would be a wonderful suggestion. And as we conclude our words of tribute to Mr. Mooreshed, Mr. Katz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was pretty sure that's what all the applause was for when I was walking out the door. It wasn't.
Well, no, it was
leaving,
for you walking out the door.
That actually generally makes a lot of people happy. But, as I think we've all said in the past, and I had the opportunity, as did Mr. Pringle, and Ms. Schenck actually also, and certainly Senator Judge Kopp, work with Mehdi in a series of different roles for a long, long time. And didn't know quite how long until he told me how long he'd been in state service, but it's always a pleasure to deal with a professional. It's always a pleasure to deal with somebody who knows their subject, and whether you agree or disagree with them, argues on merit and on substance, and doesn't take it personally. And I've enjoyed the working relationship tremendously. I think I understand why. I don't know why he didn't just stay till 50 years. He was so close, but I can also understand getting out at this point. And I want to thank you for all you've done, not just at the train here in the high speed, but in the legislature and for transportation and improving the quality of life for millions of people in California. This state would be in much worse shape had you not served in the legislature and on this commission, and we will miss you. But I know you're going to enjoy, you probably won't miss us as much as we miss you. But thank you, Mehdi. And thank you, Linda, also for letting you and helping you and allowing you the time to do all this.
Very good point. Well, I want to thank all my colleagues. You all have said a lot, and we are, in paying tribute to our executive director, really recognizing his service to the state over a number of years. I met Mehdi 22 years ago when I was first elected to the legislature, and his focus then, I think, was to kill most of my bills. So it really has been a full evolution.
That was good work.
But I don't know, it was 1999, I believe, when I ran into Mehdi at the coffee shop outside my office in Irvine at the time, when he was in a van traveling up and down the Lausanne corridor looking at routes for the high-speed train. It really is interesting. There's always going to be knocks on people who work in state service or government service because being paid for with taxpayer funds, people look and say, well, people with big visions, big ideas, people who are working hard may not do it the way every single taxpayer may wish. But it really is reflective when you see someone of Mehdi's caliber, when every dollar that was put to his salary, put to the causes he's been focused on, I think is a dollar well spent. Mehdi has been very diligent in serving this state far beyond monetary benefit and far beyond probably personal benefit. But he sees the grander purpose of his service, and you are really a model to all of us for the hard work and dedication and sticking with your priorities and focus. It's all been said that we would not be at this place right now without your involvement and your nurturing and caring of high-speed rail to today. And I know for a fact that is true. And I think we all are going to be very much benefited by it. And it's been truly a benefit to me and every member of this board to have the opportunity to serve with you. And on behalf of the people of California, I want to thank you for your service. And with that, we have a couple small tokens beyond the little plaque that will say the Mooreshed engine or whatever it is that we will commemorate at a later date. On behalf of my colleagues on the board, here's a few small gifts and tokens of our appreciation for you, not paid for with taxpayer funds. Of course, as soon as you get home, you can open this bottle of Silver Oak, or you can hold it for a couple years and toast it with these wine glasses, which are etched with the logo of the High Speed Rail Authority on those. I think that we should have those in first class on the first train, because those are very cool glasses. I like that etching. But again, Mehdi, thank you very much for your wonderful service. Yeah, I think these are the very first glasses ever because the team etched them up. Right. Jeff is scratching glass in his office at night. So again, with all of our due thanks, congratulations, Mehdi, on your service. And since all of us stood earlier, Richard had to make up for that.
I just wanted to acknowledge his role a second time in killing your bills. That's all.
Yes, and Mr. Mooreshed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't really expecting this, so I didn't have anything prepared to say, other than just saying that it's been an honor and a privilege to be able to do what I did for the people of California, to give me the opportunity to do that. It's very few places in the world where an immigrant from another country can come in here and have the same opportunities and rights and responsibilities as any other citizen and be a contributing member of the society. Everything I've done has been based on my desire to contribute my part to making the state that has been so good to me a better place for the future. And I'm happy that I've had the opportunity to do that. I want to thank all of you for giving me that opportunity. And I want to particularly thank Carrie Purvahidi and Dan Levitt, who over the last 12 years, frankly, carried me through the process. I was there just simply to just talk and make some decision, doing other things, but I didn't do any work. And they'll tell you that the work was done by Carrie and Dan and a few other staffers that we've had. And I have to say that we're really proud of what we were able to achieve with very, very limited resources available to us. And that's something, a lesson for everybody, and I think particularly for people in the public sector as well, that it's not always necessary to dump a whole lot of money on any issue. Sometimes it is possible for a small core group who have the dedication and the ability to carry things forward without lavishing large sums of money on them and without lavishing a large amount of public funds on it. So if we could do it, I think others can do it too. I can't say that any of us really possess any extraordinary abilities or so forth, other than dedication and want to do a good job. And I want to just thank the staff for having been a part of that. And again, thank you and the people of California for having given me that honor and privilege to do that. And I'm now truly looking forward to figuring out what it is like to do nothing. And I'm glad to see that Richard Cass didn't get away with but not saying anything, because he tried to avoid it. But he got caught. He walked in too early, Richard. And as Chairman Pringle references to his bills, if his bills were defeated in the Senate Transportation Committee, I guarantee you they really deserve to be defeated. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No, in your final shots, you can, take whichever cheap action you wish. So, very good. Thank you for those kind words. And now, if you get back to work,
my official, yes,
finalize the executive director's report.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. A few items. One, as you all know, there has been a audit going on by the Auditor General of the High-Speed Rail Authority's work. The auditors have been in our office looking at our documents and conducting interviews and so forth. They're in the process of finalizing and writing their report. They've had some initial meetings with us in terms of, additional questions and comments and so forth. We've been told that they will be releasing the report on April 12th, that they will make it available to the authority, and that the authority will have 5 days to respond to the questions and comments and so forth before they publish the final report. Given the timing of that, and I'll get to the board meeting time a little bit later, is that time period is going to fit into, in between your board meetings. So in order to facilitate the official response of the authority, if the board wishes to act, you might want to think about whether the board wants to do it, you authorize the board members, or how a mechanism you want to have board involvement in responding to the Auditor General's report on that day. So that's an issue that I think I would like to ask that you consider. And
Mr. Morshett, on that regard, if
yes.
I may, if we could then ask for our agenda for April to include the authorization of the Executive Administrative Committee to be able to meet and respond within that period of time. And that action, if we have it agendized for our April meeting, then the full board will be able to discuss and vote on that at that time.
Very good. The other thing another thing relating item is the fact that the currently scheduled board meeting is for first Tuesdays of every month, and that happens to fall on April 1st. Also, it happens to be the day before that there is a state holiday, Cesar Chavez Day, and you won't be able to hold public meetings and so forth, or do your committee meetings. So what we are recommending that the board changes that board meeting to April 7th, and April 8th, I'm sorry, for the board meeting on April 8th on Thursday, it's following Thursday, and that you hold your committee meetings on April 7th, day before that, and also pursuant to the discussion on the earlier agenda item relative to the release of the document, that we're recommending that the board conduct a public hearing, even though it's not legally required, we think it's a good idea to do it, to have a public hearing on that document on April 7th in the morning, to provide, of April 7th, so you can have a public hearing on that, then have committee meetings in the afternoon, and then the board meeting the following day. So if the board concurs with that, then we will arrange this.
Therefore, the staff's recommendation, and I would assume at the end of our day that will be the direction to adjourn until that time. April 7th being a hearing on the Bay Area to Central Valley revised draft program environmental impact report. And in the morning of April 7th, committee meetings scheduled in the afternoon of April 7th, and our board meeting being in the morning, starting in the morning of April 8th.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention that we are recommending, because the public hearing on the environmental issues, and that we need to be a good idea to do it someplace close to the corridor itself. So we are recommending that you hold your public meeting in San Jose, and Mr. Deardon has informed me that the Board of Supervisors room is available, and it's located on 70 West Harding Street, so that's our suggestion. San Jose.
On April 8th will be our board meeting at the San Jose location, and April 7th and 8th is when we do all of our activities. Yes, Mr. Crane.
My finance committee meeting will probably take place on a date earlier than April 7th. I assume that's okay with you.
I think it would be fine as long as it's properly noticed, and our team can tell you how to live within that schedule.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the finance, Mr. Crane and Ms. Schenk, if you can let us know what the date is that you want to have, all we have to do is just provide the numbers.
You're going to pull it together. You're going to tell us when the date is, because Tom has to be on by phone.
Right.
So.
Okay.
Very good.
Notice has to be given.
Yes.
Okay. We'll do that.
And with that, if I may, Mr. Moore, should start. What is the notice requirement for those meetings, Mr. Spanos?
For the committee meetings?
Yes.
10 days.
Okay.
Written notice. Now, and that's, if it's to be held by teleconference, then we also have to put the particulars, the details of that in the notice.
Certainly. So that will be noticed on the website and available once a date is determined. Thank you. Ms. Morshin.
Another item, we just passed out a memo to you, and I just want to bring to your attention, and it's going to be on the website, that deals factually with some issues raised about the ridership and the factors used in ridership and the coefficients and so forth. So the memo is our effort or attempt to factually document what has occurred and what the facts are in that as we know it. And it's available to you. We made it available to the public, and it will be on the website. The agreement with the gateway cities, all the agreement between us and the cities and everybody has been completed, and they have recommended somebody they would like to have come on board as their consultants, and we're in the process of executing that contract with our PMO contractors, so that should be on the way. And the one other thing that I wanted to report was that, just for you and others to know, that's during the interim period, because Kerry Purvahidi is going to be acting as executive director, and in order to somewhat balance the load, I'm moving all the engineering functions and engineering responsibilities and put it under direct supervision of Dan Levitt.
Very good. That brings us to the end of our agenda. Yes, Mr. Katz.
Mr. Chairman, one thing that Mr. Morshed reminded me of when he was talking from the committee yesterday, because the board is making it very clear that any alternatives that are in alternative studies or any elimination of alternatives are board decisions as opposed to staff decisions. And because we're pushing so hard, against deadlines, Mr. Morshed pointed out, as did Mr. Daniels, that sometimes one of the delays is the fact we only meet once a month. So we've asked them to identify for us if there are critical push periods in that decision-making process where the board may have to get together a second time during the month in order to allow for board decisions as opposed to staff decisions on those critical issues. And so that's something that we've asked them to take a look at and let us know should that occur, because as you made clear at several meetings ago and others have, very much want the public to know that these are going to be decisions made by the board. And as Rod pointed out yesterday, we're pushing our staff incredibly hard. We're pushing our consultants incredibly hard. The least we can do is work with those time frames, and if it means meeting a second or even a third time to meet those deadlines, we should be available to do it.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that point forward. I know legally and definitionally there's a concern on the board, the perception that the board is voting or taking action on an alternatives analysis. I don't know if that's correct. I think what we tried to fashion is, in fact, information on some critical issues being brought to the board and at least having the public level of awareness, because through an alternatives analysis, I believe there's multiple alternatives that change all of the time. So I don't think you're saying every modification or change or revision of an alternative in the analysis process needs to have some degree of board interaction. But at the same time, I think it's really important, because this is an area that all of us have been somewhat concerned about, is how we have some of the choices of alternatives and streamlining of alternatives has been made. And that is why I very much appreciate on the outreach report on page 3, it's specifically saying that there needs to be some published description about how decisions will be made about selecting alternatives for the future study and other key issues. And I've spoken with Mr. Barker about this, as well as Ms. Porvahidi and our legal counsel, as to how we could expedite this part to make sure we have a very clear path on where are those points where there's board input, where there's a public opportunity for input, and where that process is able to move forward. So in every one of these areas, people can see we are right here, and here is the next point for input. So if I may ask the staff to work to develop that description so that we can adopt that, and then in fact in this next period maybe bring to us in each of these key segment areas where those decision points will be and when that information will be provided to the board.
No, I think that's the right approach. I also think that I would like to see, and hopefully, I know we're redoing the website, we're going to make it more user-friendly. I would love to see a matrix on that website so that any member of the public can look and find the information you're talking about whenever they want to know exactly the decision points, exactly where it is in the process. I know that when Jeff Morales was at Caltrans, he did something similar on the transportation programs that California had. We're doing something similar with Measure R in Los Angeles. I think you do something similar with Measure M in Orange County. But it's a great way for the public to track it. So that's a good addition.
Very good. So thanks for that additional information. We have 3 items on our closed session agenda. I do not know if, in fact, we'll report any action out of closed session, but it will probably be a little while. So if there's no immediate business come before open session, we will move to closed session. Adjourned until our meeting of April 8th.